Okay. Hello, this is Diana Muqallid. I'm a Lebanese journalist. I'm a co-founder of Daraj Media Platform. I'm based here in Beirut. Thank you for joining us to this webinar under the title of The Ripple Effect, Tech Harms Against People and Democratic Rights in the MENA region. During this webinar, we'll consider the critical issue of tech platforms' failures in protecting people in our region, with a special emphasis on recent events in Palestine. We'll highlight how social media platforms are silencing Palestine-related content and facilitating the spread of genocidal narratives. The webinar will then examine the wide impacts of the current events on human rights in the region and the role of platforms in safeguarding vulnerable populations, including members of the queer community. We'll also discuss the broader implications of these developments from democratic rights and freedoms, as it is becoming clear that big tech companies have few, if any, concrete plans to safeguard elections in 2024 in the MENA region, particularly in Tunisia, Kurdistan, and Jordan, among others. I would like just to share part of my experience in my newsroom. In our editorial meeting last week, I asked our social media editor, so we can write Palestine or not yet? Since in the past 5 months, we couldn't even write the word Palestine. And she said, no, the broken, weird wording is still continuing. We still can't write Palestine. We have to put symbols and letters in the word and break it down. Same applies to words like genocide, although that is exactly what is happening. The example of silencing Palestinian content on social media are endless. The removal of Palestinian voices on social media has accelerated, as has the lack of oversight. Just as Israel is militarily, technologically, and numerically superior, so the information war is similarly imbalanced. Disinformation can change the tide of public opinion and ultimately cost lives. When we allow the path of dehumanizing Palestinians, which is what a lot of the Western media has been doing, it becomes very easy to pick up and repeat a lot of the disinformation. Disinformation kills, so does failing to challenge harmful and dehumanizing rhetoric. This is a significant imbalance of power. Thank you again for joining us in this webinar, and I'm very happy to have our speakers here with me. We have Mona Shtay, Digital Action, presenting the MENA White Paper, Priorities for the Region and Tech Harms in the Current Events in Palestine. Mona is the Campaign and Partnership Manager and Corporate Engagement Lead at Digital Actions. She's also a non-resident fellow at Tahrir Institute for Middle East Policy, focusing on surveillance and digital rights in MENA region. Also, we're joined by Rasha Yunus, Human Rights Watch, presenting Secure Our Socials campaign. Rasha is interim deputy director of the LGBT rights program at Human Rights Watch. In her capacity as senior researcher with the program, Rasha has since 2018 been investigating abuses against LGBT people in the Middle East and North Africa region. Her recent works has focused on state-sponsored digital targeting of LGBT people around the region. Also, we're joined by Amna Mizuni. Amna is from Digital Citizenship, speaking about the tech harms in view of the expected elections in Tunisia later this year. Amna is originally a digital and communication specialist. She is the CEO and founder of Digital Citizenship, an initiative and consultancy for women and girls' digital inclusion and the spread of digital literacy across Tunisia. She is an advocate for open culture and open knowledge, a community leader in the Wikimedia. Last but not least, we're joined by Khalid Mansour, Meta's Oversight Board, covering the role of Meta and its responsibilities for protecting people and democratic rights in the MENA region, a writer and an analyst for 30 years of experience as a journalist and then a UN spokesperson. He worked for years in conflict and transitional situations such as in South Africa, Afghanistan, Iraq, Lebanon, and Sudan, in addition to reporting on US politics in Washington, D.C. in the 90s and South Africa and apartheid in the early 90s. Also, Khalid is a writer. He publishes regularly on his blog. He has several books. Thank you all for joining me. And I would like to start with you, Mona. in light of what is happening now in Gaza, what are the most prominent forms of tech harms to which citizens or Palestinians mainly are exposed? Of course, it's not only Palestinians, but now they are the most vulnerable and the most who are really exposed to limitations and have no access to proper information. What do you think are the harms that has been caused so far?
Thank you so much, Diana, for your question. I think since the start of this ongoing events in Palestine, Israel, we've been witnessing how social media platforms are flooded with disinformation, misinformation, incitement to genocide, hate speech all over social media platforms. We've also seen a huge censorship of Palestinian voices and pro-Palestine content or Palestine-related content whenever it's shared on social media platforms. And in many cases, we've been also speaking about this content that has been censored on Meta's platforms. And we usually focus on that because Meta's platforms are widely used between Palestinians and people in the Middle East, as you may know. As such, we've seen this disinformation all over the place where social media platforms are failing of preventing this information from spreading all over, keeping in mind the whole communication blackout where people are unable to be connected to the internet in Gaza Strip during the ongoing events. There's also a restriction, or this information is restricting people's right to access to life-saving information, because this information is just killing people, it's just denying them the right to access information, timely information with everything that's going on. Keeping in mind the whole disinformation point, we're also looking into incitement, hate speech, and violent speech that we and the civil society organizations, whether locally, regionally, or internationally, have been trying to grab social media platforms' attention to invest more resources to prevent such kind of rhetoric or content of being online, especially that kind of content that is reflected on real-world harm, where people are attacked on the ground based on this content. And in January, I have to say that in January 26th, when the ICJ were providing their provisional measures to the state of Israel, they've mentioned that the state of Israel should stop and punish the incitement to genocide, in which or where much of that is happening on social media platforms. Since then, and even before that, we haven't seen any of the social media platforms invested or announced any serious measurements to prevent such kind of content of being spread all over. We're also witnessing and documenting censorship of spreading Palestine-related content, including the content that document human rights violations and war crimes on the ground. And in many cases, those documentations were in very sensitive moments, such as in the first time the hospital, Al Ahli Hospital, was bombed in Gaza. At that night, Meta was censoring Palestine-related content when people were documenting what's happening in that hospital. This is among other cases where also documentation of hate speech and where documentation of war crime is happening on the ground. Human Rights Watch also published a Palestine-related report where they documented over 1,000 cases for what's happening in Palestine, where also social media platforms, and more particularly Meta, are practicing something called shadow banning, where they are reducing the visibility and the reachability of the Palestine-related content. By doing that, they are denying people of the right to access information because they are reducing the reachability and visibility for certain content. And this is not something new. This has been happening for years now, and it's proved by even independent entities that were hired by Meta, such as the Business for Social Responsibility Network, who's published a report in September 2022 acknowledging or confirming the civil society arguments that Meta's content moderation policies are biased against Palestinians. They are largely moderating Palestinian Arabic content, barely moderating Israeli Hebrew content, content, which basically affect Palestinian right to free speech, gathering and assembly, political participation, as well as non-discrimination. I'll stop here, but the story doesn't stop here, because there are different cases in the MENA region where we're gonna hear my colleagues, Emna and Rasha, highlighting different stories for different groups and different issues in the MENA region, where Meta and other social media platforms are lacking their investment or are not investing enough resources to protect people in this region. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mona. I wanted to jump to Khalid, but I will give more first Amna and Rasha the turn, so you can, Khalid, respond to everyone. I'm sure that you have many points that you need to comment on. Well, Amna, thank you for joining us. You know, Tunisia is, there will be elections in Tunisia this year. And to us, Tunisia, not only the cradle of revolutions in 2010, but it was a model. Unfortunately, it has been plagued by another wave of autocracy. So many technology companies have turned into digital authoritarian platforms. How will companies' negligence affect the upcoming elections in Tunisia, from your point of view?
Thank you so much, Diana. I just want to give a little bit of history to this point. It's true that we started, it's claimed globally, we started the Arab uprising in 2010, 2011. But it started way before. There was a movement way before where the role of tech companies or tech products was very crucial. There was a movement of bloggers in Tunisia that were documenting human rights abuses in the country, and that's how it led to the popular uprising. We used massively Facebook to communicate between each other, to prepare protests and other things. What happened after, and that was despite of the massive surveillance and censorship, and just to mention that we used to have specific pages on Facebook censored so that we don't access to the information about the atrocities of the previous regime. That has been said, tech companies were an ally to the revolution in Tunisia in many, many ways. And civic journalism became a big part of, let's say, introducing the freedom of expression, freedom of media, and other freedoms, basically to the general public. But unfortunately, that is no longer the case. Tech companies now are behind a lot of harm and are being used by the authorities in a way, basically, to catch every free voice speaking of what's happening. We did a research to talk about freedom of expression in Tunisia, and the cases from 2013 to 2023 were about, or 2021 exactly, were about 70 cases of people who published something related to the civic space or the political situation in Tunisia and were arrested or legally pursued. That number doubled from 2021 till now. And with the introduction of the law 54 on freedom of expression, it's even going worse. It's not touching only activists, it's touching media people, journalists, business people, politicians, of course. Anyone who is willing to speak publicly is a target. And so, unfortunately, the tech companies and their products are being very harmful right now to the general public, to the main, basically, to the people in Tunisia, as well as to the democracy. And we all know that we witnessed a backsliding in our democratic process in 2021. It's so unfortunate that the platforms that helped us in the freedom, in reaching a certain level of freedom, are now the platforms that are spreading hate speech against, for example, politicians women politicians, judges, media personalities against sub-Saharan Africans. And we witnessed, unfortunately, last year, a huge campaign of slaughtering of Black people in Tunisia based on a huge, massive campaign that went on social media and mainly on Facebook and TikTok. So the increase of hate speech, unfortunately, will not help any democratic transition, or will not help in achieving even making better the situation right now. So it's a kind of a very explosive cocktail when you have the harm of the tech products, and then you have the authorities that are using laws, new laws, and using every evidence possible they can extract, even from direct messages, to silence everybody. And so, unfortunately, it's touching every sector and every person in the society, from the LGBT community to the Black people, either they are Tunisians or Sub-Saharans, immigrants or non-immigrants. Everybody is touched, and of course, politicians. I hope I gave a little bit of an image of what's happening right now in Tunisia, and I'll be happy to give more.
Thank you so much, Anna. I'll move to you, Rasha. Rasha, you've been documenting a lot lately. You have met several cases across the region exposing and documenting what kind of abuse that they have been subject to. How does the current situation in the Middle East and in the region affecting the rights of the LGBT communities? We've seen Iraq criminalizing the word gender. We've seen lots of violent cases and violent backlash in several countries. Are they benefiting from the current situation to crack down on the vulnerables among our societies?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your question. The main issue that I want to discuss here is the digital platform responsibility, in the sense that, in 2023, we documented and published a report that documented the offline consequences of digital targeting by security forces in 5 countries in the region, in Egypt, Iraq, Jordan, Lebanon, and Tunisia, and demonstrated in the report that online abuses against LGBT people are not transient, but rather reverberate throughout their lives, in some cases for years after the instance of online abuse, potentially ruining people's lives. The report found that security forces across the MENA region have entrapped LGBT people based on their online activity on social media and dating applications, subjected them to online extortion, online harassment, primarily on Facebook and Instagram, and outing, primarily on Facebook and Instagram, and relied on illegitimately obtained digital evidence, I put evidence in quotes, or information such as chats, photos, and similar information to secure their prosecution. The digital platform responsibility angle here, and the thing that we focus on in the following campaign that we just published in January 2024, is that Meta, specifically Instagram and Facebook, have underinvested in user safety and underestimated the roles that its platforms play in facilitating abuses against LGBT people in the Middle East and North Africa region. The people that I interviewed in the report and for the following campaign reported losing their jobs, including in places like Tunisia, Egypt, Lebanon, being subjected to family violence, including conversion practices, having to change their place of residence and even flee the country for risk of prosecution, and experiencing severe mental health consequences as a result of being targeted online, especially in online harassment and outing campaigns on Facebook and Instagram. The reason why we chose to focus on Meta in this campaign, even though the report speaks about other digital platforms as well, not just Instagram and Facebook, is that among the dozens and dozens of LGBT people I interviewed, each and every one of them indicated that they had reported being harassed, doxxed, outed, and abused on Facebook and Instagram but in all these cases, Meta either did not respond to their complaints or found that the content they reported did not violate its policies and the content remained online. So as a follow-up to the report based on its recommendations, the campaign, which we call Secure Our Socials, identifies ongoing issues of concern and aims to engage Meta platforms, specifically Facebook and Instagram, to publish meaningful data on investment in user safety, including regarding content moderation in the MENA region and around the world. In many instances that we have documented for the campaign and for the report, the data is absent. So we don't know how many content moderators, for example, who are proficient in every dialect of the Arabic language are employed by Meta, not only contracted or subcontracted or contracted by Meta. And we don't know the underpinning reason as to why these complaints and this abusive content is remaining online in the cases where it harms LGBT people in the MENA region. Whereas in the same token, in a December 2023 report, I co-authored with my colleague Deborah Brown, Human Rights Watch's investigation in the forms of censorship on Instagram and Facebook affecting posts and accounts, documenting and condemning human rights abuses and raising awareness about Palestine. We found that the censorship of content related to Palestine on Instagram and Facebook is systemic, global, and a product of the company's failure to meet its human rights due diligence responsibilities. The reason I bring up the report in light of the campaign is because the same issues apply to the campaign, which is centered around the need for transparency, accountability, and consistency in applying Meta's policies and protecting user safety and free expression around the Middle East and North Africa region, especially in times when crises transfer online and the very imminent abuse and the really difficult to describe reverberation of this abuse against people who are vulnerable, who are marginalized, who need these platforms to express themselves, to connect, to be empowered. This is a very dangerous phenomenon on digital platforms and needs to be addressed structurally and not in piecemeal solutions.
Thank you so much, Rasha. I'll be moving to you, Khalid. I'm sure you have to respond to the points raised by Mona, Emna, and Rasha. I know that you are a member of the Oversight Board. The recommendations that comes out of the board are not legally binding to Meta. But can you respond to the points that they have risen minutes ago? And what are the challenges are you facing?
Thank you very much, Diana, and thanks to Mona, Emna, and Rasha for bringing and encapsulating what is a tall order of issues any social movement, human rights group, or digital rights group should have with social media platforms. Firstly, as you said, I don't work for Meta. Let's just move that out of the equation. Meta has a lot to answer for, and my job as member of the Independent Oversight Board is also to ask Meta and hold it accountable. Now, is Meta behaving well? Maybe compared to TikTok and X and other platforms, it is the only one that has an independent oversight function that we can pass judgment on now or later after it matures a little bit. It is the only one that claims that being member of the UN Guiding Principles on Human Rights, and that commitment we should hold it responsible for. We should hold it responsible for more transparency. It's not really actually money that's primarily needed here. When Russia spoke about it's transparency for researchers, for human rights activists, for vulnerable communities, and changing policies. Because the community guidelines, which is the Bible of Meta, under which it removes content, or they prefer to call it demote content, and most of the humans using Meta platforms call it shadow banning, is actually affecting more people than the removal of content. My point is that we need to differentiate two things. MENA spoke about Law 54 in Tunisia. Good. There are actually similar laws in Egypt, Saudi Arabia, India, Israel, Russia. All of them are criminalizing Facebook posting. And some of these agencies, like in Egypt, they are entrapping, for example, the queer community using apps. I don't know about how much they use social media, but they use apps, dating apps, to entrap the queer communities. The role of Meta, or any social media platform, and actually the dating apps themselves, is to protect their users. Is to go all the way out and improve their doxing policies, for example. Is to be more responsive to user complaints. The scale argument that we hear back from Meta and other social media platforms is not good enough. They tell you we have 3.5 billion accounts. Okay, well, you made $17 billion in profits in the last quarter of 2023. So I'm sure you can spend more money. Of course, they cannot have humans do everything, because you have 35 million content decisions a day in a place like Meta for Facebook and Instagram. 95% of that is done by classifiers. Then there is something that we guys in the oversight board have also been asking for, is more transparency about classifiers, especially classifiers that affect both, they affect MENA region, both politically, but also socially. Two examples, hate speech and counterterrorism community policies. Most of the removals from this region is actually because of these classifiers. We need more audits of the classifiers. We need more transparency about the training material that they use it to build. The classifiers are basically, for all our audience, are algorithms, machine learning algorithms, that they feed it information, and they're supposed to act intelligently using artificial intelligence techniques and approaches to remove stuff that's hate speech or that's terroristic. I mean, the problem with counterterrorism or the dangerous organization and individuals' policies that companies like Meta, and all companies, by the way, would follow, is that they claim they have to be completely compliant with US and European laws that prevent material and non-material support and representation of terrorist organizations. The problem with that is over-enforcement, huge over-enforcement. I mean, one of the issues that we have been working on the board for a few months, and hopefully we will issue a decision later this month, is about the use of one word that's responsible for the largest amount of removals on Meta platforms, which is the word Shaheed, which doesn't translate well into martyr in, sorry about all these balloons, this is Zoom, which doesn't translate well into martyr in English, but this word alone was responsible for a lot of removals, simply because artificial intelligence algorithms are not intelligent all the time, and sometimes built in them, they repeat the biases and the problems of humans, especially humans who have been in control. In that case, they are most likely non-Arab, non-gay, non-queer, non-brown, etc., etc. And that's a problem we have to focus on and we have to work on. So we have to admit that, yes, probably Meta has gone further than X and even YouTube and others in committing itself to human rights principles, establishing this oversight board. However, we have to make sure this is not whitewashing. We have to make sure that this is an actual commitment and that this board can do its work properly.
Thank you so much, Khalid. I'll go back to you, Mona. From what Khalid said about the need to have more transparency with the tech companies, and considering the present context, what measures do you anticipate Meta, along with other social media companies, should implement to safeguard citizens in the MENA region amidst what's happening now and the war in Gaza? How can we take the transparency to the second level? What should they do?
Thanks, Yana. Thanks, Khaled, Rasha, and Anna for all this rich conversation. I've put in the chat a link for a white paper that we've been working on with our MENA partners, and we are just publishing today in occasion of this webinar, where we are putting a series of documentation of repetitive and systematic failure for social media platforms. And obviously, Meta is one of the largest companies in the region, where they fail to protect even not only LGBTQ, not only like democracy in general, not only people in Gaza, but also they failed to protect elections, women candidates and elections in Iraq. There's also the protests in Tunis, among other cases that happened in Lebanon and Algeria, among others. It's very rich with different examples of systematic failure for social media platforms to protect people and their democratic rights in the MENA region from tech harms. And when we are speaking about that, we're not speaking about the only problem as transparency. We're speaking about things beyond that, because we knew that the social media platforms, more particularly Meta, are investing millions of dollars to protect people, but whom those investments are not there to protect people in global majority countries, or more particularly in the MENA region. They are investing a lot of resources to protect the US democracy or people in the US, and we're not seeing something like that has been invested to protect people in global majority countries. So we're not speaking about transparency. We're speaking about transparency about those investments, to understand how they are distributing their investments to protect people. Are they investing those resources based on the assessed risk or based on the market side? Because as we can see, they are investing much of that in the US, where they are legally held accountable, and where they also have a huge market in the US. So we're speaking about different problems where transparency is one of them. Another point, when we are speaking about transparency, Meta, among other social media platforms, have been speaking about their transparency reports, which I claim that they do lack transparency, unfortunately. One of them, Meta, is usually saying that they are highlighting governmental requests in their transparency report, where in the Palestinian-Israeli case, we can't see any voluntary requests, which most of the takedowns in this region are happening based on the voluntary request directed from the Israeli cyber law to the social media platforms. Only at the first month of this ongoing event, the Israeli public prosecutor have sent over 8,500 requests to the social media platforms, and 60% out of those were directed toward Meta. They have accepted 94% out of those requests. And social media platforms didn't announce any numbers, didn't say anything about those requests. They only announced numbers about the Israeli legal requests that are coming from the court or from on a very legal way. Another point of view, whenever we are speaking about transparency, we have seen a lot of cases where there is algorithmic bias and on Meta's platforms, where AI-generated stickers, where mistranslation on Meta's platforms has been occurring since the beginning of this ongoing events, and it's basically substantially contributing to dehumanize Palestinians, labeling them and stereotyping them. And we've been asking them for algorithmic transparency, and yet the company didn't announce anything. We've met last month a group of civil society organizations, including myself. We've met with Nick Black, who's the vice president of Mark Zuckerberg. And we were asking, frankly, about what investments, give us numbers about investments that the company has made. And the company so far didn't announce any any concrete numbers about their financial or human resources, additional human resources that they put into their platform since the beginning of this ongoing crisis. Hence, we're not speaking about only like transparency as one word. We're speaking about different layers of transparency. We're speaking about engagement with civil society. We're speaking about transparency or allowing data accessibility for researchers, because even researchers who want to explore what's going on their platforms, they can't get proper access to analyze what's going on. So we're speaking about different and multi-layered and huge problem, systematic failure for the platforms to protect people and their democratic rights from tech harms. I'll stop here. I'll post again the link in the chat box so people can have access to the white paper. But I also would encourage people to put their questions in the Q&A section so we can pass it to Diana and to the other colleagues along this discussion. Thank you, Diana.
Thank you, Mona. Again, if any of the participants would like to send us a question, we'll have the last 10 minutes for open Q&A. So please post your questions if you have any. Amna, you wanted to respond to Khalid. I've read your note that you want to respond to his comments. Feel free to respond and also tell us, now what are the most crucial recommendations for tech companies to safeguard the upcoming elections in Tunisia, knowing that there is a smear campaign against the opponents of Qais Said.
Thank you so much for allowing me to briefly comment. It alarms me to hear that there is a review on the word shaheed on Meta. It really alarms me because it's beyond attacking freedom of expression. It's attacking the core of language, which is our Arabic language. If we start reviewing and removing words like that, we're gonna be ending up with every word that supposedly do not comply with the Western value or Western Orientalism toward our language. That bothers me a lot. And if I would give an example, even in the campaign against sub-Saharan Africans, I don't think using the N word, for example, or its translation into the Derja would help by removing content. That would not help. I'm not trying to endorse violent content, of course, but if we start, and which we observed as digital citizenship, if we start removing content based on one word, two words, we observed that a lot of content with Allahu Akbar was removed or hidden. A lot of content with Shaheed, Mulatham, etc. Everything like that, it comes from, I think, the Palestinian case, and it will be widespread to other countries. And so that's alarming so much. I just wanted to point this point, because you have to keep in mind, this is about a language. It's not only the language, it's the identity of many people. Whether it's the MENA region, whether are Arabic speakers everywhere. So yeah, it's very important. And going back to Tunis and going back to the elections and the asks, or let's say, what would tech companies do actually? I would like to link to what Mona was saying, which is very, very important. We need more transparency and accuracy. And for example, the ads library. The ads library was one of the asks that we had in 2019 elections in Tunisia. It was not accessible to NGOs in Tunisia to see and follow how much political candidates they were putting and dumping money, crazy money in ads. So that's one of the things. Do we have access, full access and transparent to the ads library? I don't think we do. We're lacking a lot of that. Also, it's like, I want to be very precise. The ads library could be open, but also we should make it wider. It's not about political pages or politicians per se. It has to involve media, community, and also groups. We have spotted and observed throughout the elections last time in 2019 and the referendum and the parliamentary elections that a lot of movement is not tracked that is happening in private Facebook groups. The policy around private Facebook groups is really one of the policies that has to change in order to ensure that we have transparency and we can really question what's happening in there. A lot of the smearing campaigns is happening, it's starting actually. It's nourished in private Facebook groups, for example. We also, I think it's a global issue, but we also have an issue of AI content that is feeding disinformation, and that is very, very crucial. The AI content, the access to private messaging, and how that was used, for example, last year, actually, no, in 2022, in the campaign against judges, accessing their private messages, outing them, and also creating and faking content. Of course, we're an Arab country. We are conservative. Even comparing to other countries, we can be very conservative. And that having videos or pictures of judges in, I would say, in a private setting would basically be a character assassination. And that's happening because there is not enough not privacy. I would say there is not enough security to social media accounts. And mainly in the case of Tunisia, we are talking here about Facebook because the Facebook is internet in Tunisia. Everything goes around in Facebook. I would say a last point in terms of the crucial recommendations for the companies, including Meta. I think we need to pay more attention to the coordinated content that is not only AI generated, but that is coming from actually private blogs and private media, not the regular media. I would say the citizens journalism platforms. That is one of the areas where we witnessed a lot of misinformation and disinformation. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll move to you, Khalid, because I know that you want to respond to what Amna said about the language, the use of Shaheed, and maybe I will add to it. Does it apply to some of the Jewish content? Let's say Amalek. Do you monitor when there is a use of words that are injected with emotions and religious ideology like Amalek and Jewish perspective? The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Amina, maybe I was not clear. I was saying that we are trying to fix a mistake, fix a problem, that the word Shaheed has been for a while used by Meta in conjunction with individuals listed on a terrorism list. And we can talk about that later if we have time, as well as with terrorism activities that are designated by Meta to remove the content. What we are trying to do is to change that policy, and I hope that we can have a good announcement in a couple of weeks. Biased? Of course they are biased. I mean, my work, your work, is to expose that bias and to insist on universal equality. That if you spend money on elections in the US, you should not differentiate between them and elections in Brazil, elections in India, election in other places. I mean, what we are clinging on, despite a tide worldwide, and not only by the tech companies, a tide towards more right-wing, more right of center, higher walls, anti-immigrant, etc., is to insist in this universality of rights and equality of all users, be they part of the global majority, or they are living in Washington, D.C. or Paris. Now, I'll just take off the hat of the oversight board and say that part of our challenge in this region is also with our governments and political systems. Those are the guys who make the laws. Those are the guys, and some of the governments from the UAE to Egypt are the ones who go to tech groups and try to impose certain restrictions, not only Israel. I mean, Israel does it more effectively because maybe it's more professional or more effective at doing their business. But many of our governments are also doing that. So we have some work to do at home on our laws. People who spent years in jails in Egypt, for example, because of a Facebook post. That tech companies cannot fix. This is something we have to fix on the ground. I just want to also answer the question from the audience about what should we do. I would say whatever little openings, as maybe apparently hypocritical as they look, seize them. If the platform gives you a chance to appeal their content decision of removal, appeal. If this platform gives you a chance to go to an appeal center or to go to an oversight board and complain. It takes time, but do it. If you live in Europe, use the Digital Services Act, which has come into force already, which gives you far more rights. If there is a petition, sign it. They pay attention because at the end of the day, corporations, of course, pay attention mainly to their bottom line, the profit line. But they care about their reputation to an extent. They care about their brand, and they care about what their users say. Of course, again, they care about certain users more than others because some animals are more equal than others, as George Orwell said. But we just have to continue fighting for our rights, I guess.
Thank you, Khalid. I'll move to you, Rasha. Actually, it's the same point I think all of you might need to respond, as it was a question for all. How would you, as civil society, push and have impact in pushing tech companies to have better practices and implement effective measures to protect human rights in the region?
Thank you, Diana, and thank you all for the really illuminating discussion. In our campaign, we try to approach Meta with solutions. We provide a variety of solutions for Meta to keep LGBT people safe on its platform and by extension, to keep everyone safe. And we ask Meta to disclose its annual investment in user safety and security, including reasoned justifications explaining how trust and safety investments are proportionate to the risk of harm for each region, language, and dialect in the Middle East and North Africa region. As an initial step towards transparency, the Secure Our Socials campaign asks Meta to disclose the annual investment that I just spoke about and inquires about the number, diversity, regional expertise, political independence, training qualifications, and relevant language, including dialect proficiency of staff or contractors tasked with moderating content originating from the MENA region. And we request that this information be made public, as all of us have been advocating for on this call and throughout this discussion. We also urge Meta to detail what automated tools are being used in its content moderation for each non-English language and dialect, prioritizing the Arabic language, including what training data and models are used and how each model is reviewed and updated over time. So we ask Meta to publish information regarding precisely when and how automated tools are used to assess content, including details regarding the frequency and impact of human oversight. So when a human content moderator takes on a case where automation does not detect any abuse, then what? How do we then look at the frequency and how do we look at the accuracy and adequacy of addressing the human rights impacts, specifically on LGBT people from this campaign, but also on everyone who is at heightened risk of harm as a result of online content. Meta's over-reliance on automation when assessing content and complaints undermines its ability to moderate content in a manner that is transparent and lacking bias. And that's exactly what we're seeing now in the Palestine context. And finally, regarding safety measures and based on uniform requests by affected individuals, so I interviewed 120 people, every single one of them said the same thing. that they would recommend a one-step lockdown tool of user accounts where individuals can hide their contact lists and introduce a mechanism to remotely wipe all Meta content on and accounts, including WhatsApp and Threads, not just Instagram and Facebook, on a given device. And the reason for this is that the minute security forces catch or detect or suspect the sexual orientation or gender diversity of an individual, they search their phones. And in many places across the region, while we have laws that say they can't search your phones and the right to privacy and all of that, but you basically have a gun to your head and you're going to hand over your phone. And when you hand over your phone, the first thing that they do is go through the contact list, go to WhatsApp, go to Instagram, Facebook, and try to find incriminating quote unquote evidence to justify the prosecution of individuals. So if individuals have the ability to remotely wipe their devices with one click, at the instance when they are approached by security forces, that would really mitigate some of the harm. And this is something very easy for Meta to implement. We reached out to Meta on January 8th. In a letter, they responded in writing, which is also not something Meta does often. Usually our conversations are off the record. They responded in writing, and when asked about transparency, when asked about the number of content moderators, etc., and all of our general asks, they basically responded that they have quote unquote enough. They have enough content moderators, they are diverse, they are this, they are that, without really disclosing any transparent information about how many. All of our asks were very detailed, and Meta responded, well, we have enough content moderators and we have policies, and really regurgitated a lot of the community standards and policies that if you go back to, it's not really about the policy itself, which in itself is flawed, but also its consistent application and its proportionate application to the risk of harm that needs to be taken into account for every case of online violence, incitement, hatred, hostility, discrimination, etc. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Rasha. Mona, you wanted to comment. Also, maybe you can answer the same question. How can we push tech companies to have better practices?
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Diana. I wanted to comment because just to follow up something on what Khaled was saying, I know like the oversight board have been trying to provide different like policy advisory opinion, decisions, and different recommendations to Meta, where even the business and the human rights, the business and business for social responsibility, human rights due diligence came as a result on your recommendation. However, keeping in mind what's going on nowadays during those ongoing events, since the beginning of October 7th, the Oversight Board only chose 2 cases from Palestine, which is a bit scary with everything going on, with all the content removal, with all the incitement, hate speech, and violent speech. So sometimes, and I know that there is a role for like each one of us, we are playing to pressure social media platforms to have more investment and to eliminate the tech harms that people are facing on the ground. But getting only 2 cases in over 6 months period in an ongoing genocide is a bit horrible, I think we need to speak about that openly, and we need to think collaboratively. How can we address such a thing, especially in this sensitive time where people are dying or are killed sometimes because of the tech harms. And this is not only in Palestine. We're speaking about things far beyond that. We've seen how the incitement against Palestinians also caused for shot and killing cases in the US. We've witnessed different documentations of those incidents in the United States. We've seen also different cases around the world. So we need also to think about those numbers and how this have like impact on Meta's policies, what changes are made. And because I know like only the decisions on the exact case that has been appealed to the oversight board is the binding for Meta. Your recommendations or your policy advisory opinion are not binding to Meta, and hence we need to speak about the self-governance models and how we can be more impactful, or how we can pressure social media platforms more. It's not only like, the point is not only to have an independent oversight board, but rather how can we push them to have more or to hold them accountable and have more binding decisions where social media platforms are incorporating your recommendations and your policy opinions into that. As for the recommendations, our campaign has around 10 recommendations where we are highlighting different things between disinformation, hate speech, gender-based violence, privacy breaches, as well as political ads, where we are covering, and we've had those recommendations after a huge consultation process with different organizations from around the globe. And I'll be putting that link in the chat box so people could have access to that. And I'll save the time if you want to share more questions with Amna, maybe.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, I will move to you, Amna. But before that, I would say Ben from Access Now has shared with us. Thank you very much, Ben, for sharing the US and EU guidance for platforms to protect human rights defenders that came out today. So anybody who would like to have a look, the link is in the chat box. Amna, back to you. How can we push tech companies to have better practices and implement effective measures to protect human rights in the region?
I think this is the $1 million question for everybody, because we've been trying. In 2019, civil society in Tunisia, led by Access Now, wrote a letter, an open letter, after several correspondences with Meta, specifically Facebook, that failure in receiving any answer. They wrote an open letter signed by lots of organizations in Tunisia, national and international organizations. Did we receive any real action back from Meta? No. I think, and I would publicly say it, I think that bothers Meta is the business. We have to make a business option. A business pressure. If we succeed in shaking their business, their $1 billion business, I think we can receive an answer from them, because I don't see them willing to prioritize the elections in our region, or not talking about MENA only, but talking about the global South. There is no priority for that. If we succeed in targeting the shareholders, I think we can do something. We can make them basically invest more in terms of content moderation. We can make them see us, despite of our color of skin or religion or ethnicity. That's number one. If civil society organizations would come together and make a campaign to the shareholders, that might have some reaction, I guess.
Thank you. Thank you, Amna. We still have almost 1 minute. I will give you the final comment, Khalid. There is a lot of frustration from the comments we've heard. Everybody's looking at tech companies, trying to push, feeling that there is a huge discrepancies and discrimination against the Global South. Would you like to respond to what you have heard?
I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done, a lot of work by the tech companies, precisely, but our experience, including of what's happening now in the war in Gaza, the powerful don't necessarily take decisions to our favor. So we need to continue, if you like, the struggle to make sure that these companies comply with what they say they are complying with, which is human rights principles, universality for all users, be they in Myanmar or in Iceland, and that they distribute their resources accordingly. So it will be good to get more transparency on resources, how they are spent. It will be even better if we can change the policies that control the content. It might be even better in future to come to have less monopoly and then not to have only one platform, but to have various platforms that can actually speak to each other. So I'm afraid I don't have any optimistic view on what's happening. There's a lot of work to be done by all of us.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Khalid. Mona, Khalid, Amna, and Rasha, thank you so much for this very much needed discussion. Yes, it opens doors. It does not lead to final solution, but I think this is what we all are trying to do. Thank you so much for the participants, for the speakers, for you, Mona, for making this happen, and hope to see you soon. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.